Hey everyone, today we're going to be looking over one of the best Gothic horror novels ever written, Bram Stoker's Dracula. This book, right here, helps set all the tropes that we know and love about vampires from the Victorian era up through the present. Because this novel has had such a huge impact on the popular consciousness for the last century or so, it's often hard to understand the context in which the ideas presented in this novel came from. Now, without wasting too much time, the overall plot of the novel is something that's basically become a cliche by this point. The main characters, Jonathan Harker and Mina Murray, travel to Eastern Europe to meet the enigmatic Count Dracula, and soon find out there's much more to this strange man than meets the eye. Dracula follows them back home to London, and of course this leads up to the climax, and then the showdown at Dracula's castle near the end. So, even though this book is a century old and has been spoiled since then, does it still have a good impact as a horror or speculative fiction novel? For that, I'd like to say, boy, it does! Especially once Van Helsing enters the picture. Dr. Van Helsing is the friend of the main characters from the Netherlands, who knows a lot about mundane and occult sciences, and is basically the major vampire hunter in the novel, and also the star of a very campy movie made a couple of decades ago. All that said, though, there's still some very interesting context in which this novel was written. The use of blood as a sexual fluid, and the vampire biting as a sort of sensual or sexual act, is emphasized in the novel even back when Bram Stoker was still alive. That aspect of the vampire mythology has given rise to Anne Rice's books like Interview with a Vampire on the more positive side, and things like Twilight and several bodice ripper romance novels on the negative side. Far more interesting to me, though, is the possible allegory of Count Dracula as a view or commentary on British Empire in Ireland at the time. Bram Stoker was of Irish descent, and he grew up during the worst of the Irish potato famine. Interestingly, Ireland would later have its own armed revolt against the British during World War I, with the Easter Rising and Irish War of Independence during 1916 and afterwards, 2 decades after Dracula was first published. The view of an overlord that sucks the blood of all those beneath him and rules parasitically upon a remote backwater is something that a lot of literary critics have kind of put into context of the British rule, or at least the Protestant rule over the Catholics in Ireland. Now, I'm not sure about Bram Stoker's own thoughts on this matter, but given the era and the context in which it was written, it cannot be overlooked. Back into the context of vampires and horror fiction, though, there are a few other writers who came before Bram Stoker who did their own takes on vampires. There was the Penny Dreadful novel, Varney the Vampire, and there was the Sheridan Le Fanu novel, Carmelia, about a lesbian vampire preying on a lonely young woman. One of Lord Byron's friends wrote a short story called The Vampire, which presents the idea of a vampire as an aristocratic figure. Interestingly, some of Dracula's own mannerisms in the novel might have been inspired by an actor that Bram Stoker worked with during the 1890s. Another element of Gothic fiction that really plays into the Dracula story is the idea of the environment and of excessive human desire. Dracula, for instance, can command fog and the wind. He also can command wolves, shape-shift, and become a creature somewhere between the environment, beasts, and man. Many of the main characters are educated figures, like Dr. Seward, Dr. Van Helsing, and the main character. As such, we have the undertones of Enlightenment versus Romanticism as well. For me, I would still recommend this novel, even though I wasn't a huge fan of it. Personally, I'm more interested in some contemporary British and American horror writers, like William Hope Hodgson, M.R. James, Ambrose Bierce, because these guys were more in tune with the type of horror that H.P. Lovecraft would later write. So, hope to see you guys next time, here at the School of Night.